back to another episode of the Future of Golf podcast. This is the show where we speak to people who are innovating and pushing the boundaries in the game of golf. And this guest this week is no exception. So we have Ben Parker, who is part of the philanthropy team at the Dormie Network. Ben, absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are we today?
It's a thrill, Graham. Thank you so much for having me. I don't get to do this very often, so hopefully we put on a little bit of show, a little bit of entertainment. I've been around the game for a long time, so hopefully I've got some news stories that nobody's heard yet.
Yeah. I love it, and I think especially that you're kind of from that media background. I guess is this something that you're relatively familiar with, like kind of being in front of the camera, or were you always like behind it and actually doing the interviewing yourself?
Yeah, fantastic question. So when I was seven-ish, my parents decided to start doing live theater as a hobby. So they were doing productions and putting people on stage. And I soon learned that I was much happier in a black shirt somewhere behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Um, I've been on stage, but it didn't keep me from pursuing a little bit of, in front of the camera, but I'm much more comfortable behind the scenes.
yeah. Quite ironic actually that I'm wearing a black shirt for this podcast as well. It just had to be the host in a black shirt. I've took the modest role, and you've took the lighter attire. Does that make sense? Um,
Nothing
but
wrong with a black shirt. It just means you're proficient. That's what it means.
Exactly. I do tend to get into that habit of if I find an outfit that works, I'll tend to replicate it. I'll just wear a black shirt in the golf course, black shirt. Tend to keep things nice and simple. If it's not
You're
broke,
the
don't
Steve
fix it.
Jobs of podcasting. Just keep it simple. Like same wardrobe. I get it. You're
If I
smart.
have his success in podcasting the same as he did in his sphere, I will not complain whatsoever.
Yeah, not bad.
But, yeah. But Ben, I think there's so many paths we could potentially go with this conversation. It seems like you've had a very fascinating career, kind of in multiple different paths, which has now led you into the golf world. We spoke a little bit before the show there about your experience in the PGA show, and it seemed like a pop culture event as opposed to a golf event. But what I always do in my guests is I kind of go back to the origin story and kind of how it all started. So do you maybe want to talk about like your earlier years and then maybe when you started getting interest for the game of golf? Like was that always a constant in your life?
Yeah, no. There's no golf prior to me discovering. Well, my parents are not golfers. I'll just put it that way. And like any kid growing up in the Seattle area, you're just looking for sunshine. And so we played baseball in the summer and fell in love with baseball. And our team was good. I mean, I was fortunate to play on a winning team. We always played in the finals. We always made it to the city championships. We played state. We actually lost to the kids that went all the way to the 1981 World Series and won the whole thing.
Wow.
There's a cool ESPN 30 for 30. We had never seen a curveball because our coaches wouldn't let us throw it. So the lefties always had a natural screwball, but otherwise we just struck out with the kid. I can't remember his last name, but Cody was the pitcher. First time we saw a curveball, and we just couldn't even hit it. So my parents moved to Salt Lake City in '83, and the summer before we were visiting, and my grandpa saw that I was bored. I'd blown up all the firecrackers that we had bought for the 4th of July, and he said, "Hey, I got a golf club and a wiffle ball. Do you want to just try it out?" So I'm hitting this wiffle ball off of a plastic tee in the driveway, and it's hitting the garage door. And he's like, "Hey, you're hitting that pretty good. We should go to a driving range." So we went to the local driving range. First ball, of course, topped it. Second ball, just right in the sweet spot. Probably flew about 175 yards, and he was like, "Whoa!" Because he wasn't a great golfer, so
Yeah.
he was just shocked that one of my first shots was, a decent shot for somebody that had never really swung a golf club before. And I was hooked at that point. I thought, okay,
Mm.
cool. Here's a sport that I can play for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And so
It's
when we moved to
interesting that
Utah,
whenever you get one good shot, that is almost all it takes. Like I had a similar experience. My parents weren't golfers as well. And yeah, it was one of my friends actually that invited me to the driving range. And I remember my dad had these second-hand set of clubs, and it was the typical butter knife 3 iron that almost looked like two-dimensional when you set it down. And like you don't know what that really means when you set up to a ball the first time. You don't know what forgiveness is in a club and things like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
same experience. Like top the first. I wasn't as quite as good as you, Ben, so I topped maybe the first five or six, and then I think it was the seventh or eighth. And you know you're hitting it off this huge driver tee as well to give you the advantage, and you do smack one, and you're like, "Ooh, I could get into that." So as you said, only takes one shot.
Yeah, the way that the club resonates in your hands, it was similar to baseball. We had wooden bats and aluminum. We were starting to use aluminum bats, but it was cool to use the wooden bats still, be old school. And so when I transferred to a wooden driver, it just felt like the crack of the bat. And occasionally that'll slip out of my mouth. If I hit a good one, I'll say, the crack of the bat.
Yeah, typical typical baseball banter. But yeah, I suppose
Yeah, I like that.
your athletic ability translated across. Like baseball, from the little baseball I've observed, is a very, fast rotational sport. Your hips kind of need to
Mhm.
fire, and I mean, I'm sure there's golfers in tour that were ex baseball players that transferred that across to golf as well.
Yeah, so when we moved to Utah, it worked out really well because I was sort of detached from my winning baseball ways, and I immediately thought, you know what, this is depressing. Like it's hard to get 17 guys together to put on a game, so I might need a easier sport like tennis or golf or something to translate to. And I chose golf, thankfully. And where we lived in Utah was just underneath the university, and they had the remnants of the original Salt Lake Country Club. The land was originally donated to the state, so they were eating up the golf course as they were putting university buildings on property. So it was kind of this hodgepodge of holes, and but they had this incredible practice area. And Vinny McGuire, the old pro. I mean, this guy was like straight out of Central Casting. He's a short guy, cigarette. He could get the ash all the way down. He's like, "Hey kid, what's up with that flying elbow? It's Hogan. It's tucked in like this, like boom, right here. Just tuck it in, kid." And he paired me with a guy named, well, his nickname was Dirty Bob. And Dirty Bob, you can picture it. It's an old Ford truck. It's a welding truck. He gets out. He's in his work boots. He's wearing his welding shirt. The slag has come through his sleeves, so he didn't have any like sleeves left. Straight up had a dog with three legs. Um,
Yeah.
it was missing a leg, and he goes, "You kid, you need to play with Bob." And I'm like terrified. Bob's like got a beard, not like now. Everybody has a beard now, but back then, if you had a beard or tattoos, you were possibly like an ex felon. So I get paired with Bob. I go out there. He pulls this golf ball out of his bag, an old balata, and it's onion textured, like an onion's been sitting in the sun too
Wow.
long.
Yeah.
And I go, "Hey Bob, I got a ball if you want it." And he goes, "Dude, this ball is 33 under." And I was like, you, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so we play, and he just shellacks me. It was only 9 holes. We went out. He was 4 under after five, and just never looked back. I think I shot three over to his 5 under, and I thought, you know what, this, you know, forget trying to like have the hard collar and the Sansa and the spikes with the little kilt, and stop trying to look perfect. Just play golf. And I started playing Dirty Bob golf. I stopped tying my laces. I still don't tie my laces when I play. Um, I can leave my shirt untucked unless I'm in a place where I can't leave it untucked,
Yeah.
and it served me well. I'd go to the golf course. I'd get paired as a single with two guys, and they'd say, "Hey, kid, come up here to the whites." And I'd say, "Oh, I'm trying to make the golf team," and they'd be like, "Oh, okay, so you have to play the blues," and I'm like, "Yeah, I have to play the blues. Sorry, and then hit it 20 yards by them, and they would go, "Okay, nice shot, kid." By the third time, I drove it past them from the blue tees, and they're playing from the whites. They're like, "Okay, we get it, you little sandbagger." So baseball totally served me well. I've always had power. That's never been an issue. Um, Such a great sport to learn how to fire the hips and have that sequencing right. I think it's the Ted Williams book where he talks about sequencing and
Mm,
the plane's horizontal, but then you just bend from the waist and you apply that to hitting the ball, and it's fun. It's really fun to see that little pearl of a bullet up in the sky, and
yeah,
it's going far.
that's a really interesting experience you had with Dirty Bob, was it?
Dirty
Dirty
Bob.
Bob. And it's interesting how that shaped your philosophy around what it meant to be a good golfer. Like, I think a lot of weekend golfers go out there and think, well, if I look good with my FootJoy t-shirt and my Ralph Lauren trousers and my, $2,000 golf bag, then that equals success and that means a good golfer. But I mean, maybe not as extreme as the Dirty Bob example, but I've definitely seen unassuming characters go up and being incredibly talented versus the golfer that maybe looks like he has an idea and in reality has no idea. Like, how has that shaped kind of your philosophy around golf, because it seems to have had quite an impact.
Yeah, it really changed everything for me. Knowing that Bob was that talented and he just didn't care about the presentation. It was about getting the ball in the hole. And so it taught me a lesson that you you never know, you really don't know somebody's potential on the golf course. You really don't know. And you really should give everybody a wide berth. They may be a terrible golfer, but they might actually be the best company on the
Mm.
golf course. And I've experienced that a number of times where they're so frustrated, they're willing to buy the next driver. They have passion for the game, and it's allowed me to really think about golf holistically. Like, everyone's going to be attracted to the game for different reasons, whether it's to get away or to get the recreation that they, or get that competition going. And I just love meeting people kind of where they're at. If they want to play a little match, well, let's play a match. If you just want to shoot the breeze, if you don't want to talk, if this is like a silent round, we're not going to talk. Like, I can do it all. Golf doesn't have to fit into a little box for me. It can be high level golf where you're playing on it. I was really lucky. I worked for a charity, Children's Miracle Network, that was part of the Disney tournament
Mm-hmm.
from 2007 to 2012. And I played with Boo Weekley. I played with Brant Snedeker. I played with a lot of pros because they allowed you to play your in round. You played with the pros while they were playing their live
Oh wow.
rounds. So I've been there playing with them at the highest level, seeing their golf all the way down to like muni golf where the greens are burned out and the cups aren't cut right. The cups are old. The flag stick. The flag doesn't hold at the top of the flag stick anymore. It's down at the bottom of the cup. And people are just there with like borrowed sets and mishmashed clubs, and they pull out this 30-year-old putter. What do you think of this? And then they hole
Mm.
everything, and you're like, you're a better golfer than a lot of
Yeah.
people. You can hang your hat on the fact that you do one part of the game better than anybody else does, and that's definitely shaped my perspective on golf. It really is for everybody, even though sometimes it feels like an exclusive
Mm.
club.
It's interesting because I've had an experience somewhat like that. So obviously, being a caddy in the UK, you get to. I mean, over the 10 years I've done it, you get to experience such a wide range of golfers. So I mean, I've caddied for a golfer that it was their second round of golf in their entire life, and they're standing up in the tee and they missed the ball in their first shot. And then caddying for I caddied for Gary Player last year, 9-time major champ,
Wow.
and like, yeah, it's not even the same sport. Like, it can't be called golf
Right.
what the people at the start play. And then observing what I could only describe as mastery, I would say, would be a way
Mm,
to describe how Gary Player, I mean, the guy is what, 80, maybe 87, 88 now. And
yeah.
I drove in, caddy master gave me a text that I was caddying for Gary Player, and he kind of had like the hunchback posture in the range, and I was like, yep, that's definitely
Hmm.
him. And over the course of 18 holes, he shot, I want to say, 3 under. at 87 off the back sticks at Kingsbarns. Uh, the most
Wow.
memorable moment,
Wow.
yeah,
Masterclass.
he dropped the ball on the seventh hole. I think he'd made a par with his actual ball, and he dropped the ball. And I can't do a South African accent, but he said, "Graham, if I hold this shot, I don't have to pay your fee for the day." And I just I went along with it. I was like, "Yeah, sure, he's definitely not holding it." Steps up, just clips it out, perfect, holds it first time, and this is like a 20-yard difficult bunker shot. He's like, "Well, Graham, I don't have to pay you today." And I'm like, what have I done? What have I done? It was the most amazing. Just like the timing of it, the way he made the comment was phenomenal. But
That's
back to
incredible.
that original point.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was so many stories from that day, and his character was something like the energy he possesses at that age is just something to admire. Like he was doing sit up, Gary Player typical
Mm.
doing sit ups and
Yeah.
push ups.
Yeah. Punch.
Yeah,
Punch. Right. I mean, that's what everybody does is Gary. Everybody has their Gary
yeah, he's a
Player.
he's a crazy man. But going back to my original point there, I've experienced such a wide range of types of golfers, from someone who's going out there that really is serious about shooting a score and that's what their entire trip is about, to guys that are lying down in the back of a cart after three-quarters of a bottle of Jack Daniels, kind of debating their life and actually having to stabilize them while they're hitting shots. I've done that from time to time as well. That's when wind starts to become a problem whenever people are getting blown over after three-quarters of a bottle of whiskey. Um, but I think you're right. It's like golf is not meant for one demographic in particular. It's kind of a sport for all, and it should be up to the individual in terms of where they want to fit in with it. I think that's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I always tell people like the Scots, they would do matches, right? And then the minute the match was over, like we're going back to the clubhouse because it's time to drink. So I just I feel like, especially here in America, it's like it's so packaged. Like golf has to be a certain way, and the reality is it doesn't actually behave that way. Um, golf can be 9 holes. Golf can be 12 holes. Golf can be like my wife will play once a year with me, and we'll go out, and she's good. She's good through the front nine, and then we leave a trail of tees because she can tee it up anywhere on the
Mm.
golf course. And I'll go and tell everybody in my group, I'll say, look, she's here. This is a huge win for me. So I'm actually like, I know the rules of golf, but you're not going to hear me say anything today about the rules of golf. So if you want to say, hey, Amy, you can't walk on the hole. Hey, you know, we don't really say anything out loud while somebody's
Yeah.
putting, stuff like that. If you want to say that to her, go right ahead. And I'll say, oh yeah, they're right, sweetheart. That's the rule. But to me, if she's there, that's a huge win. And I don't care if we leave a bunch of tees in the fairway all the way up to the
Mm.
green.
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be golfers listening to this that are on the other side of it, which are like entirely traditional folks and are like,
Hmm.
the rules of the game are there to create a certain experience and to
Hmm.
to make golf differentiate from a lot of sports, because I think that attitude does contribute. But I think there is also, I think you're right, there's a time and a place for that, and maybe like a serious match, or maybe it's a very special course and you're playing it for the first time. Perhaps those attitudes are
Yeah.
more applicable. Whereas if you're out and you're playing the front tees in Ballyhack and you're trying to get round before sunset, then and I just remembered that from our conversation before.
Yeah, the go track at
But
Ballyhack.
I think,
Hmm.
that attitude, and we'll get into the Dormie Network a little bit and kind of what you're working at. But I think, the attitude of being able to play the front tees and get round in an hour and 20 minutes, kind of, it resonates with your original message there, Ben, of saying that golf should be for everyone and you can play it kind of from any location and kind of any way you want.
Yeah, I mean, you step on a tee box with somebody, and I'm not a stickler for the rules. I believe in karma, though, so I don't take a lot of mulligans because it usually manifests itself somewhere on the course. Like if I if I'm playing with somebody and we agree that there's a mulligan on the first tee because there wasn't a practice range or or we didn't warm up, or we're teeing off early. Um, I have a hard time taking one, just because I feel like golf karma comes back and always will mistreat you if you don't play the game straight up. Like if you bump your ball in the rough, you're asking for it. Like you're gonna miss that putt, you're gonna flub a chip, you're gonna the ball's gonna take offline on you. And I I don't want to say to somebody like you have to play by the rules, but I definitely want to um, I definitely want them to understand, like from my perspective, it just will come back to bite you. And it almost always does. Like I have a superstition, I don't even hit out a turn. So if we're in the fairway and somebody's still looking for their ball and I've already helped them, now I've walked to the other side and they're still behind me, I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
hit, because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to hit a horrible shot because I didn't wait my turn. I was just a little impatient. They're like, no, go ahead. And I'm just like I can't, no, you're cool, go ahead, that kind of thing. So, but it all depends on who the host is. If you're playing with somebody and they want a serious match, they want to be straight up, they want to have their shirts tucked in, and that's fun too. That's really fun, especially if they want you to walk the course. I did a campaign for Jack and Barbara Nicklaus called Play Yellow, and that was a real thrill. Like I'm a kid from Seattle. I never dreamed of like working with
Mm-hmm.
my hero. One of my heroes, Amy, my wife, she's like, there's a couple people you haven't met, but I've been fortunate to meet Jack and work with him and Barbara. And so I was very lucky. I did this campaign with Jack and Barbara Nicholas called Play Yellow. Just a thrill to meet my hero and meet Barbara. Everything that everybody says about Barbara Nicholas is true. She's an absolute saint. Um, Jack told us this crazy story where James Garner was over at the house and they were upstairs, and Barbara was really pregnant, like super pregnant, like time to have a baby pregnant. And he she's like, "Hey, honey, I'm a little cold. Could you make a fire?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll get to it." Well, he put her off throughout the night because they were just having fun, talking, shooting pool, whatever. Not being a jerk, but just not really being the attentive husband that he probably should have been. And she made the fire. He came down. She made the fire. He's like, "Oh, honey, you shouldn't have done that." And eventually, she came upstairs. She's like, "Okay, it's time to go to the hospital." And he's like, "Oh, would you just give us a few minutes?" And she's like, "No, I think we should go to the hospital." Well, she'd been saying that the whole night, like, "Well, maybe you should go to the hospital." Well, her water had broken. It was time to go have the baby. She was just
Crazy.
like, "You okay? You're an
So
absolute
she
saint."
didn't even make an issue
So
of it at all. You just
didn't even make an issue of it. Like, yeah, you guys have your fun. You talk up there. I mean, she's a real saint, and seeing her passion for children's healthcare and children's initiative, her initiative, her drive to do good, raise a lot of money. I think they're going to hit $100 million since they announced the campaign in 2019. So that's really cool. They're actually ahead. It was a 5-year goal to raise $100 million for Children's Hospital. So that's a thrill for me. But through Jack and Barbara, I got an invite to play Muirfield Village, and I went with the tournament director. Well, he's the executive tournament director. He was my host. I mean, we walked, we had caddies, we played it straight up. He was keep it score, I mean, there's those times in your life where you're privileged, you're blessed to experience golf you're in somebody's
yeah.
house, right? Like you're a guest, you're in their house, and it was a real thrill. But that came through this avenue of fundraising and charity work, which we can talk about. But going to a special place like Muirfield Village where you
Yeah.
can't get on, and it's special, it's unique. Yes, I'm going to fix divots, I'm going to
On
fix
your
ball
best
marks,
behavior.
i'm
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm going to be like the best guest you've ever seen. And I'm not going to hold anybody up. It's not about me. I'm going to shoot what I'm going to shoot, and I'm going to praise the golf course to no end. And it was
Hmm.
praiseworthy. In fact, we got to 17, and it narrows down, and they had just lengthened the course, and they had redone the course, and this was Jack, where he said, "This is my last bite of the apple." And the fairways were so perfect that they looked to me like a putting green in terms of like the sheen, the color, no divots, just cut really tight. You know, the ball was sitting up, and it was intimidating because it's like, wow, these are really special conditions to play golf, and so cool. Just what a thrill to play Muirfield Village. But back to that point of, sometimes you really have to pay attention to the environment you're in, and I like people. I like it when
Hmm.
people have a good time, and um,
Yeah,
and and usually that's good for me
absolutely.
too.
It's interesting. So I mentioned there before the show, it was my first experience at the PGA show this year. And I hadn't played much golf stateside before, and I hadn't experienced like the whole cart golf way of things because it's all walking in the UK. And especially like the American
Yeah,
hospitality as well. Like we arrived at the hotel, open the door, welcome Mr. Curry. Like I hadn't experienced that before just because it's not as like customer service is different over in the UK. Like they'll kind of make a joke out of you over here. That is like our way of loving it. Whereas America is very much like
yeah,
they show you your privilege, which I loved. But back to that point,
mm,
so it was very much cart golf, beers, music, and I loved it. That was the
music.
Floridian style of golf. But you're right. There's a time and a place for everything. I'm curious, Ben, to dive a little bit more into this whole philanthropic side of kind of what you do day to day. It seems like I'm curious. Whenever you met Mr. Nicholas, was that after you had been involved with the Dormie Network? Was that how that connection was made?
It's actually prior to. So I was working in. So I'll try to be quick. So here's how it goes. Um, I'm I'm graduating from high school. My friend gets a job with Ringling Brothers Circus in Japan. So for my summer job, I go to Japan and I work for Ringling Brothers Circus as an electrician. My parents had their theater, so I knew everything about lighting and sound and all that stuff to put on a show. So I did that for that summer. I came home. My sisters got married. I went back out to Japan and served a 2 year
Wow.
service mission
Hmm.
for my church. And so I got really good at Japanese. And so when I came home, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was in radio, I was in television, but I kind of wanted to get out of the entertainment business. So I decided, it'd be really unique and special is to become a teaching professional that's
Hmm.
bilingual. So I will teach golf in Japanese as an American. And based on the celebrities that I had seen in Japan that were foreign, but they spoke Japanese fluently, I thought, ooh, this could be really unique, special. I could carve out like my own little world in the golf world. And then I could start doing golf as part of my career. I could have golf be part of my life, which I was already passionate about. So I'm so naive. I joined the PGA of America. I signed on as a pro. I go to work that summer. I work the entire summer. We get to the end of the season, and my boss says, "What are you going to do for the winter time?" And I'm like, "What are you talking
Yeah.
about? I'm a golf pro." He's like, "Well, we all have to like, find work." And I'm like, what have I done to myself? Like it just took the gloss off of being a pro. I thought it was this glamorous thing, but the reality is you work your butt off and you work long hours and it's a lot of thankless work. So I go get a job at a TV station because video instruction was just becoming the hot ticket. Um, and luckily, the station GM, KSL, is our NBC affiliate here in Salt Lake. The GM was a huge golfer and is a huge golfer. And he came and asked me if I was interested in doing a golf show. And I was like,
Perfect.
of course, TV and golf, I'm all in. I don't know much about TV, but let's do it. So that spring, we shot the pilot, and it became a TV show. And I was producing, writing, and kind of learning my ropes on this TV show. It was like a, like a I don't know, it's like a lifestyle show. It's like, hey, let's go visit a golf course, and oh, look at this interesting golf hole, and oh, here's a rule. You know, if you're going to start playing golf, here's some rules you should learn. It's that kind of TV show.
And
Not
what
very interesting,
frame was
but
that,
really
Ben? Just
fun
to give
to work
context,
on.
like what year will we be talking that you started that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
94. God,
94,
yeah. I
1994.
guess
Yeah, so I'm a 24-year-old. I'm trying to figure out like what I want to do with my life, and I lucked out. I got this TV gig, and I was able to still work at the golf course, Riverbend, which was a fairly new course here in Utah at the time. And eventually, the money was better in TV, and so I left golf. I told everybody, I'll be back. Don't worry. I'll retire. I'll teach golf when I'm old. I want to be Harvey Penick. I want to be in a button-down shirt under a shady tree on the driving range. Don't worry. I'll be back. I can always come back to golf. So I I started working in television full time. I ended up getting a job with the Utah Jazz. I was their scoreboard producer, worked with the mascot, did all the game ops, all the funny videos in the arena, all the fan prompts, commercials, stuff like that. Really fun job. I thought I was
Mhm.
going to do that forever. And there was a change in the Larry Miller organization, and they asked me if I would freelance that job. And I had a young child, another one on the way, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So I went full into film production, editing. I was doing commercials, working on uh, a couple of TV shows, but mostly film and commercials. And while I was doing that job, this would have been like 95. Oh, sorry,
I was
2005.
wondering,
So much
yeah,
later.
one
But
year would be pretty good to
2005.
roll that. I was thinking you've had a very productive 1994 to to come. So that makes more sense. 2005. Yeah.
That's an impressive year. Yeah, so 9 years later, I get a phone call from the same GM at the TV station who now has retired twice and is working for this charity, Children's Miracle Network, which is Marie Osmond, John Schneider, 170 children's hospitals. And I get a phone call to work with him. He says, "Hey, do you want to work on this TV show? It's a celebrity golf TV show that we film in Hawaii every February." And I'm like, "I'm there." So I come on board. I'm writing, I'm producing, I'm directing, and I'm editing. Great freelance gig. I get to meet the people at Children's Miracle Network. I get to work with Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Bo Jackson, Dr. J. I mean, you name it, Eric Lindros. I mean, just the kind of the elevated Hall of Fame type athletes that came and played on this TV show for charity. And I came up with the theme, which sport makes the better golfer, hockey versus baseball versus football versus basketball. So it had this kind of theme, and it's still on Golf Channel. It now raises $3 million a year, and that's all credit to Ace Hardware and their incredible vendors that support the event and want to get out of Chicago when it's freezing but cold
Yeah.
and go to
Yeah. It doesn't
Hawaii
sound
for
like
a
a hard
week.
sell to me.
And that's what introduced me to charity. That was really my break. That was sort of the introduction to marry golf,
Hmm.
TV, and charity. And it was an incredible run. I started with them in 2007, the same year that they signed the contract with the PGA Tour. So they're like, "Hey Ben, who's that?" And I'm like, "You mean the silhouette of Tom Lehman in the fairway? Like that's Tom Lehman. Like how do you not know that's Tom Lehman? Like nobody looks like him, nobody walks like him, nobody." They're like, "Okay, you're a nerd. Just you're signed up." So I was lucky. I got to work with the great people at Disney, the incredible people at the PGA Tour, and then Walmart was an underwriting sponsor at the time. So suddenly I'm now working with professional golf at the highest level, the PGA Tour. Unbelievable. Just a dream come true for me personally. So I worked on that. I still had the Ace shootout in Hawaii every year. I did that for 15 years. Um, and that led to some personal projects. And one of my personal projects was to try and help the average golf tournament organizer be more
Mhm.
successful with their fundraising. And through that work, what I discovered was that the high net worth golfer was not really participating in the
Mhm.
bad scramble. They kind
Gotcha.
of shied away from it. Like, hey, this is my time. Like, if I'm going to golf, like I'm going to go to my club. I'm going to play in 3.5 hours. I'm going to sit down to my meal. I'm not going to have a bad rubber chicken dinner. I'm not going to spend 5.5 hours with some drunk guys from the sales team. I, I've only heard about that. I've never actually seen that happen. But how do you get that decision maker back into the fold and have them help you with your fundraising goals? Because we know golf gives back on an incredible scale every year. It's something like $4.5 billion through 150,000 charitable events, and I think that's just the U.S. and Canada. That's not even the rest of the world. So who knows what the global
Yeah.
fundraising impact is for golf. So I started to like I'm starting to narrow it down, and that's when I met Dormie Network. Is right about the time that I was just starting to like tighten it down to not being so broad, and how can we do this coming off the heels of a killer
Yeah.
campaign with Jack and
It's
Barbara
very
Nicklaus.
fun to hear like all these different stories. So the Barbara Nicholas story, and then kind of getting involved into the media side of things and having that skill set, then becoming more involved in professional golf, all kind of merging together to kind of finally get this destination for you, finally being the Dormie Network. Um, I guess before we get into what the Dormie Network is and kind of what it represents, I'm interested. Do you ever like kind of look back retrospectively and kind of see how all these things kind of merge perfectly to create the storm that now is your role at the Dormie Network? I'm always curious because I guess I'm at the beginning of my journey in the golf industry, and sometimes you think, the steps I'm taking, how will this line up in 10, 20, 30 years? Do you ever kind of look back
Mm.
at your path, or are you very much more like forward focus in the future?
Well, I feel blessed, and it's because of those little intersections. So it's hard to see it. Like if I had been smart, if I had understood the power of networking when we talked a
Yeah.
little bit about the PGA show in 1994. I mean, who was there? I mean, Scotty Cameron was there, Karsten Solheim was there, the guy that started Ping. I mean, holy smokes. Eli Callaway was there. I held the 7-foot Big Bertha driver, and he's introducing me to Alice Cooper. Johnny Miller was in the booth. It's like, this is unreal. And I should have held on to all of those contacts. I should have been working them or staying connected, because it is the power of golf. If you notice, and I'm sure you notice this when you're caddying, is that you're only like 1 degree away
Mhm.
from the other person. They'll say, "Oh, yeah, I play out of this club, or I've played over here." And you're like, "Wait a second, do you know so and so?" And they're like, "Yeah, he was our club champion 2 years ago." And so it's funny how golf, the intersections of golf, the degrees of
Mm,
separation are very small, and that's the difference. Golf is a continuous thread in my career. I played with the CEO in a charity tournament, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, sounds like I'm working for you." I mean, it's almost that simple, to where golf opened the door for that next opportunity, or invited me back in, or created that connection with somebody. And you never know. It could be finance, it could be the restaurant business, it could be charity work, it could be there's
yeah.
all intersects of life on the golf course, and you usually meet people that have some drive. Almost everybody has drive to want to be better at the game, or they have a drive to be good at business, and um, that creates opportunity
Yeah,
if you're
it's
if you're
absolutely
open to
true.
it.
I mentioned there before that I'd moved to Portugal only recently, here 5 or 6 weeks, and I was kind of thinking like, how am I going to establish my network here? And I run kind of semi frequently. I do maybe 3 or 4 days a week. So I went down to a running club one of the first nights I was here, and I was expecting like this kind of Mediterranean accent to greet me, and it was actually a guy from Northern Ireland that ran the running club. And it was pretty much a quarter Irish guys, and got speaking to a guy, a big, tall, 6'7" fella, and he was a really keen golfer. And it turned out that his family had a house in the south of Portugal that just so happened to be free in 2 weekends' time. So I said, if you're free next weekend and you have a spare set of clubs, I wouldn't mind coming with you to play in the Algarve. And yeah, like became one of my better friends here so far. It just shows, yeah, it seems to be like a denominator in a lot of social connections. And also, you're right, it's like that competitive spirit as well. A lot of people are driven. And one thing I always think, it's very difficult to find a facilitator of somewhere where you can spend 5 hours with someone and just pick their brain. I don't think that happens naturally anywhere else in life unless you're going to a bar or dinner. But golf's different because you're out in nature and you can
Mm.
really get to know someone's personality through that. So yeah, I couldn't agree more to that testament.
Yeah, and it is their personality, because you come away, you're like, God, I really like that guy, or that gal. Like I really enjoy them. And you may not know that much about their life. You just know how they are on the golf course and what their interests are, and
Hmm.
usually that's pretty
Yeah, and I
attractive.
think that kind of segues nicely into your current role at the minute, Ben. So maybe for the people that aren't familiar with the Dormie Network and your mission, obviously I've explored a high level overview, so I can see there that you've got a network of courses across the US where people can travel. They're just paying one membership fee, and then they have access to all these facilities. Do you want to maybe explain a bit more depth in terms of kind of how it all started and then what your mission is, both with the company and then the philanthropy side behind it as well?
Yeah, I've been with the company for a year, so if I have my facts incorrect,
Yeah,
we'll put some disclaimer language down on the bottom.
I'll include
May or may
subtitles
not
if we
be
need them.
actual facts. Um, yeah, so our owners are unique. They started a publishing company, Sandhills Publishing, out of Lincoln, Nebraska, and that created an opportunity later in life where they had set up some businesses for their sons. They have three sons, and the youngest son, Division II golfer, um, wasn't super highly motivated to run the chicken business that they had created for him. So they sold the chicken business to Tyson. And about the same time, there was an opportunity to buy Arbor Links, which is an Arnold Palmer design outside of Nebraska City. And I outside of Nebraska City. Nebraska City is very small, so outside of Nebraska City is like a stone's throw. So unbelievably cool design in the middle of cornfields. It's straight up field of dreams. Build it and they will come. You're driving down a dirt road and it's like paradise in the middle of a cornfield. So that was the first course. Um, since then, we've acquired two Corin Crenshaw's Dormie Club, which is in Pinehurst. That one's beautiful. That one's on 1,200 acres. It's like your great grandfather bought property back 100 years ago and has never sold it to anybody. And so you're in these North Carolina pines, and it's Corin Crenshaw. So the course is very rustic and looks like it's been there for ages, and so much fun to play. The other Corin Crenshaw is up in New Jersey, New Egg Harbor. Beautiful clubhouse, just a perfect setting, not far from the water, so you kind of get that sense that you're close to the water, even though you're in between the trees. Just beautiful. It's classic Corin Crenshaw, just challenging, rewarding, punishing at times. The other two, there's another two, and they're Fazios. So Victoria
Mhm.
Nationals, where they play the Corn Ferry Tour Finals. Super hard golf course, but one of those where you play it and then you want to immediately go back to the first tee. You're like, oh, okay, I lost 6 balls, but
Yeah.
I I'm going to be better this time. And you go back to the first tee, and the course just continues to challenge you every time you play it. That one's in Evansville, Indiana. If you go south down to Briggs Ranch in San Antonio, and then another Tom Fazio course, Texas Hill Country, just outside of San Antonio. Just so pretty. Just the landscape, the topography, the rollingness, the drier look. They don't overwater it, so it doesn't have that
Yeah.
lush vibe to it. It has more of that sort of traditional burned out not burned out, but just sort of
Yeah, got yeah,
backed off of Lush.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
that Augusta National thing. So it plays firm and fast, really fun, just cool clubhouse, taco carts made out of an old Chevy.
Nice.
It's just that place is awesome. And then Ballyhack is in Roanoke, Virginia, and that's the one that has goats and the goat track, and you can play way up. Like you play it like a par three course. You just zip around and play it at the end of the day. Lester George, I met Lester
Hmm.
George at the PGA show that you went to this last year. He said that if he had had the land for Kinloch,
Wow.
that's the course that he would have built. Kinloch gets all the reviews. Ballyhack is very dokish. It's just cool shot values. There's times where you're on a hanging lie, but you've got to hit this cut because you want the ball to land softly against the slope and then work its way down to the hole. And
Yeah.
it's like, do I even
That's
have
how
that shot?
golf.
And you
That's how
can picture
golfers
it.
like you would
You
think,
pull it
Ben. I
off or
think
not,
most
but
of
you
us
could
would
picture
just
it,
be
right?
hoping and praying to get it somewhere near the green. You're thinking more about shot shapes. But yeah, like Ballyhack drew me initially because of the Irish name. I just kind of looked at your website there, but it does like some elements of it remind me of Ireland with like the wispy grass and then the wildness of just having goats around the fairways as well. I thought that was a pretty cool touch.
Shared fairways. There's one fairway where it feels like a polo ground because it's just it's three fairways tied together, and they're divided by rocks or the native grasses, but you're like, oh my gosh, like this is so expansive. You get that feeling, and then it tightens down and squeeze. Anyway, just
Hmm.
very clever architecture. The seventh course is not Ballyhack. That's I've already mentioned that one. Grable, and that's in the middle. That's a David McClay course, and that one's in production right now. So um, it should be open in 25. That one's going to be amazing. I don't know if you've played any McClay Kid courses, but he has a unique way of making it feel like no earth was moved. Like you're seeing the land as it was presented to the designer, almost like they just laid a carpet
Yeah,
of
it's
perfect
such a
turf
great
on top of
touch.
it. So
It's such a great touch when a designer
that
can do
one will be
that.
great.
It almost looks like the natural land was untouched. Is a lot of courses in Ireland and Scotland have that feel. There's one. I don't know if you've been to Ireland. I know you said you haven't been to Europe to play much. And you should definitely should. There's one called Doonbeg in County Clare. That's just the most dramatic
Yeah,
dunes,
Dunbeg.
and the
Hmm.
fairways are almost kind of like in this tunnel in between. Like the dunes are so high, but it's super dramatic, and it feels like just a golf course has almost appeared amongst the land, and it was just kind of meant to be. But yeah, it's such a skill of the designer to be able to pull that off. Um, Ben, I'm curious. In this last year, there's obviously been a lot going on at Dormie Network. You mentioned there about Grable, a new course under development. Maybe if you want to mention kind of some of the highlights of being involved in something like this for a year and kind of where everything's taken you so far.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been fortunate, obviously to see the properties. I I came to the foundation because it's a fairly new organization. I mean, it's really since 2016 was when the first course was purchased. And then the foundation itself was only started right before COVID.
Oh, of
Perfect
course,
time to
yeah.
start a new business venture, of course, as most of us made, similar mistakes. But the foundation started by Brian Shank and our owner, Zach P. They had the idea that what we would do is we would give back 100% of Dormie Network assets to nonprofits. So originally it started through simple stay and play packages. So you'd go to a charity event, you'd see four people go to Ballyhack and a night stay and two rounds of golf. Well, obviously that was extremely popular, and it's gotten to the point where we're
Hmm.
actually not offering that quite as much, just because
Yep.
of the popularity and the membership has grown over the years. Our sister company, Golf Status, which manages it's a golf tournament software platform. They currently have that
Hmm.
inventory to help their nonprofits. So, kind of a handoff to the sister company to help them with their goals and initiatives. So the foundation currently supports nonprofits through a 1 year donated membership. So this is if you came in off the street, wanted to join Dormie Network. It's a national membership, so there's no local members, which means the tea sheet is very spread out. It's 15-minute tea times. It's very luxurious that way. There's only 60 beds on each property, so it feels like you're
Yeah.
king or queen of the property when you're there, which is part of the vibe, part of the experience. But more importantly, this 1 year membership, if you came in off the street, it would be $20,000 initiation deposit and $10,000 dues. And what we're doing on the charity side is when we donate this 1 year membership to our nonprofit partners, they are getting a minimum bid of $7,500 for that 1 year membership. And then 100% of that money stays with the cause. So what I like from a charity standpoint is that nobody's
Yeah.
paying us to fundraise. We're doing this altruistically. We're supporting the cause. We're meeting them where they're at. What do they care about? What do they want to support? Is it children's health? Is it mental health issues? Is it first responder, military? Is it the environment? Is it youth programs, youth sports, things like that? Is kind of like, those are pretty big buckets, but it does kind of narrow down to what we
Mhm.
care about and what we support at Dormie Network. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be part of the success story. We'll probably continue to do this model where we donate 1 year memberships. We make it really convenient for the donor golfer
Okay.
to renew their membership at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So there is a cherry on top. But for people who love travel and love golf and love new
Mhm.
experiences, or they want to entertain at a high level, or they just want to get away and really feel like they're in a remote place where they're being catered to, it's sort of like the Ritz Carlton or the Four Seasons meets national membership. The food and
Yeah.
beverage
The
is off
whole
the
the
charts.
whole model to it seems
There's a
very
slushy.
it's not something I've heard of before, and it's a smart idea in terms of you have these quality venues across the country. You've obviously people who are intrigued and trying different courses, but perhaps don't want to, go through the effort of booking a new place every time or having to find a member in that state. So I think the tying together of the courses in your network makes so much sense. The only the only model I've heard kind of similar to this, and this is just an individual scenario. I met a company at the PGA show. Everything seems to go down in this PGA show. It was actually ran by Irish folks. It's just south of Paris, and it's called the Condor. If you ever heard of this, so basically this really
Oh,
high end hotel, and it will
no.
only host up to 12 guests per night. But the idea is the group will essentially own the property for their stay. So again, everything is laid to them. They have full access to the course, so they can choose whatever time they go out at. Um, but I thought, I'd never heard of anything like that, and that was a super intriguing model. Obviously you guys have tea times at your venues, but it seems like that very, high end luxury experience that is appealing to people who like travel, and obviously if they're taking people with them to show them a good time as well.
Yeah, the crazy one is we have a secret eighth golf course that we don't talk about very much called TX0. Um, it's down in the Gulf of Mexico. You have to land a plane
Mm-hmm.
to play it, so you got to have a tail number. Same story, if you're if you're a big enough group, if you're 16
Mm-hmm.
people, you have the property to yourself. The chef cooks your meals. You tee off whenever you want. You go off again. Very similar. Every now and then there's that perfect scenario where it's like you've got high net worth, the 1%. They do have a plane. They can swing this. They're going to raise a lot of money for charity, but they're going to have a great time doing it.
Yeah,
So
that sounds like a lot of fun.
ultimate
And the
party with a
secret's been
purpose.
revealed now as well. Everyone's going to know about this eighth golf course. You've blown it, Ben.
You can find it. It's not like Nanea where Nene on the Big Island in Hawaii, they actually hid it from
Fantastic.
Google Maps. You can't look at it from Google
Absolutely.
Maps.
And
It's
Ben,
not quite that
I'm sure
secret.
we could talk for hours going into the mission of the Dormie Network, but I'm curious kind of what maybe personally your goals are in terms of what you're looking to get out of being part of the Dormie Network over the next few years, and then just generally the Dormie Network as a whole. How are you guys kind of continuing these philanthropic ambitions over the next few years?
Yeah, great question. I love putting on events. I learned that from my experience with the PGA Tour, and then also having the TV show. They don't necessarily have to be a lot of people. I do like smaller groups, but if I could put together a couple of seven-figure
Mm-hmm.
fundraisers for the Dormie Network, that would be a real thrill for me. I've loved meeting. I've met
Wow.
200 over 200 charities this year just by reaching out or through my existing network. So I'm hearing all sorts of stories and causes. And when I take time to hear about what their goals are, what they want to accomplish, some of their success stories, meeting the actual benefactors, it's really rewarding work. And I think this happens to everybody. I think everyone gets into their life, their career, family. They just kind of get going, and we see it with tour players too, where they're cruising along, and then they kind of hit the
Mm-hmm.
wall right around 40, and they're like, okay, now what? Like what, now what? Not that they're not doing incredible work, but how could you elevate what it means?
Mm-hmm.
Is you don't necessarily have to have a legacy, but I have found by combining work and philanthropy that I feel fulfilled. Whereas when I was in the film and television industry, it's just sort of an empty hole. You'd make the product and you'd say, God, I hope the public is, I hope they're suckers. I hope they all watch it. I think it was P.T. Barnum who said there's a sucker that's born every minute. And so having been in the commerce world, you still have to have commerce because commerce drives everything. But can you start working in that philanthropy, and you don't want to be Scrooge. You don't want to be at the end of your life saying, "Oh my gosh, I've wasted all these years and I've hoarded all my money and I've hoarded all my things." So for me, this sort of work, means the world to me. I can wake up knowing that I'm doing good. We do have goals as a company. We do want to grow to probably 10 properties, maybe 12 properties when it's all said and done. But we'll be a small group and we'll be really good at what we do long term. We don't want to get so big that we sort of lose our edge or lose our ability to serve and provide the hospitality that we want. And then in terms of fundraising, sort of sky's the limit as we get introduced to these incredible people that are movers and shakers. They're going to help us build what that future fundraising looks like. And eventually, we'll be a cash granting organization in the $5 to $7 million range is where we're headed. We've got a ways to go because we're not really raising
Mm-hmm.
the money at Dormie Network with our members. We're doing it on behalf of other nonprofits, and we're recognizing those funds raised. I'm proud to say we're about to hit 3 million. We're in September. We're at almost $3 million for the year. So we've got a great model. We've got a lot of happy nonprofits, a lot of happy donor golfers who are going to property and saying this is incredible. So for me, I'm just going to continue on this path of introducing nonprofits and individuals to Dormie Network and sharing with them our mission, and then eventually building
Fantastic.
those
And I
seven
think
figure
the point
events
you
on
mentioned
top of
there
what
about
we're doing.
fulfillment, I think that was the big thing I took. The work you're doing seems to really mean something to you. And ultimately, I guess you have the vision of, helping people, but also you get to see the impact of what you do, as opposed to your film career. You mentioned there you just kind of put it out and just hope the public would kind of take what you're doing. Whereas I think that's kind of a beautiful full circle where you can reach out to these nonprofits, understand their story, and get to know the folks, and then ultimately see the benefit. I would imagine that can be very rewarding.
And I mean, you have causes that you care about or causes that you've supported, and we all know somebody who's needed something. And I I had the rare opportunity to interview Arnold Palmer. We were giving him an award, a Lifetime Achievement Award for the great work that he had done in the Orlando area. 2 hospitals, huge foundation, huge tournament. Um, I was very fortunate to interview him, and it was a little scripted. You know, they handed us like a script, ask him this, ask him that, but he was entirely genuine to me, and I think he had that ability with everybody that he met. But he said it's our honor. I mean, we're benevolent as golfers to find ways to give back, and it's upon us to do so. And hey, it's Arnold Palmer asking you to be good and give back with your network and with your golf and with your career, and he wasn't wrong. That's the right thing to do. We can do more, we can do better. um, and it's fun to do it through golf. It's just such a great
Absolutely. When
medium
the king speaks, you got to listen,
to
right?
make a
You
difference.
don't have much other option. But Ben, that was very fascinating from my perspective, and I'm sure for our viewership to learn more about your story. A lot of winding past, but eventually your Venn diagrams kind of all met up there, and you kind of found the perfect spot of philanthropy and golf. So genuinely fascinating. If anyone wants to hear a little bit more about the Dormie Network, or maybe a charity's watching this and is just generally curious, is there anywhere best online where they can go to check out a bit more about it?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, just under Ben Parker. I'll give everybody my email. It's ben-parker at dormienetwork.com. Um, please reach out. Um, every now and then I'll meet a nonprofit and they'll say, well, we're not really into golf. And I said, well,
Yeah,
all roads lead to
yeah,
golf. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be the
oh
greatest
yeah,
tennis player in the world. Trust me, you're going to golf before it's all said and done. And I always tell them, like, you just don't understand the power of golf, and it'll happen for you. It'll happen for your fundraising. So, yeah, if anybody wants help, I'm not the most experienced person, but I've had my fair share of events and days in the trenches, putting together goodie bags at midnight before the tournament. I've done all of that. So if you need advice, or if you just need somebody to talk to and say, I wish people would pay their registration fees, or you have ideas, creative ideas about fundraising,
awesome.
please reach out.
Well
It'd be
said.
fun
I
to meet
think
you
we'll
and
end it at that,
and
Ben.
talk to
But
you.
again, my pleasure to have you on. Super interesting.